Should arm wrestlers use straps in their assistance exercises like deadlifts and rows? Well, like most things, it really depends. It depends on what you want to get out of those exercises. Let's take a row as the example. What is the purpose of the row in terms of general bodybuilding? Most people do them to target the lats in particular, so using straps to take grip strength out of the equation makes sense for dialing in on only the lats and other back muscles to work around their own specific limits, allowing you to use loads that your grip otherwise could not keep a hold of. And that is just fine and dandy for that specific purpose, but that's not a very athletic type of movement to isolate specific parts of a chain. It can be beneficial for athletic movements, but it does not mimic how it would be done in the real world in that type of pulling motion. So in that sense, for real life carryover, it might be more beneficial to not use straps and train the grip, forearms and entire chain of its motion, and allow them to be the limiting factor as they should be. But with arm wrestling we throw a screw in the works. In arm wrestling we do have straps, and our ability to hold on to the opponent via squeezing or crushing grip strength is very minimally important, even outside of straps. When you have two hands holding, both of them need to be committed to not letting go, and if one chooses to let go, then the other has a very hard time not letting go. And as we normally see, if they do try to hold on, they end up grabbing at the fingers instead of the full grip. So then, in that sense, absolute grip strength becomes less useful in arm wrestling, and if we go into straps on the table, the strength of the lats and the upper back become more directly isolated and allowed to work free from restraints. So there is the argument for using straps to train those pulling movements, but there is another case where not using straps becomes very useful, and it is one that does not get talked about enough, even in specific kinesiology circles and movement spheres. That is the idea of the athletic hand. And what is an athletic hand? Is it not just a hand that an athlete has? Well, yes and no. There are some who do and some who don't. An athletic hand can be best understood by explaining its negative, the computer hand. I'm sure that brings ideas to mind right away. A computer hand is a hand that is trained in very specific micro movements and has absolutely no ruggedness or ability to operate within unexpected vectors. Of course, a person who has a computer hand is probably not going to be entirely unable to do anything else at all. It's more of a spectrum between the two things, so you can move deeper into the computer hand and further out of it. So then the athletic type of hand is the hand that most top-level arm wrestlers have acquired and is so beneficial to the sport. It is the hand that is strong and able, with many big and small muscles functional in isolation, but extending all the way up the arm and really through the entire body in terms of trained movement patterns to allow the body to output force in very many different and forceful ways. If you were, say, a computer worker who also trained the barbell row a few times per week with or without straps, you would be very unlikely to have any athletic hand type development. But why is that? Because you are training the hand in very limited ways, and in those limited ways there is very little actual movement within the hand itself. If you compare how a powerlifter deadlifts, you will see that the hand is set like a rock, and then the rest of the body expresses itself through that dead lump. They will often explicitly say that the hand should be minimally involved in the pull and used only as a hook. And beyond just grabbing the bar, they have specific types of grip to further negate a grip as a breaking point, or in more blunt terms, to not require grip strength at all. Which is fine for the deadlift being trained for the deadlift, and compare how arm wrestlers, if they do train the deadlift, favour a much more active hand in the same movement. There is a focus on actually deadlifting to challenge the hand, and you can see it in sports like judo too, where the hand becomes a very active component in the movements. They'll do things like pull-ups, but with ropes and towels instead of stiff ergonomic bars, because these much better prepare the hands for gripping the gi of the opponent and having to hold on while exerting and resisting forces in all kinds of directions, which is also something that plays a huge role in arm wrestling. Rather than training a movement to lift as much weight as possible by working to make the movement itself as easy as possible aside from the load, it can be very beneficial at times to make that movement more difficult for particular components within it and forego the chase for absolute weight. So this athletic hand, I think, is very useful, if not essential, for top level arm wrestling, rather than a dead hand, even if it is a solid hand bluntly channeling the strength of the rest of the body. If you are training towards arm wrestling in a way that puts it in a category as an actual sport, you will need, rather than just being strong, to know how to move and implement movements in a strong way. And outside of sports, this happens with people who, as you probably guessed, do a lot of hard and heavy manual labor. Things like construction workers, dock workers, iron workers, basically anything that requires gripping, holding, and maneuvering all kinds of odd-shaped objects in odd positions and directions. So you'll find almost stereotypically that people who have worked in jobs like these for a long time, despite not actually training in the gym, have very strong and able grips and often overall strength. Not specifically because the jobs with objects have trained the muscles to be stronger, although they will have done so to some extent, but because the hand and the entire body has become much more attuned to actually expressing what strength they do have throughout the entire chain. And so, back to using straps or not. Well, I think it still depends. It depends on what you want to train and when you want to train it. In a typical block periodization style of training, I would put this athletic type of hand training in a large amount towards the start, while you are training very broadly and non-specifically. Because remember, arm wrestling itself will also train the hand in these ways. So things like towel deadlifts or pull-ups as a main exercise would probably be safe to slot in while you do GPP at the start, where the focus is on learning and developing the raw abilities rather than chasing weight. In something like a more conjugate or west side style system, you could just plug these in as a variant of a movement you do anyway. So instead of pull-ups, you could do towel pull-ups, or instead of hammer curls or pronation, you could do it with towels or different shapes of grip. And as for the deadlifts and rows, it also depends on what you want to get from them. If you wanted to do them purely for lat or back strength, then go ahead and strap up, but if the focus is to hit the hands in a more complete pulling chain, do without them. But remember, despite being visually similar at a glance, these are all very different types of exercises, with different loads and different targets, so take that into account if you do decide to do them. And that's that. Go check out the Patreon for more content and join the Discord for conversations. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.